Welcome to the Relationship Recovery Podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way.
Hello, and as always, thank you so much for being here and being a part of my community. I wanted to give you all a quick update before we dive into anything. This will be the last podcast that has the Relationship Recovery Podcast as the name. The purpose of that is that shortly after I started this podcast, I learned that another podcast had the name. It's been 2 years and no one ever said anything with it. I personally didn't care because I figured, you found me, you know what I'm about, you know it's me, you found them, you found them. And I truly believe that everybody goes to whatever will help them the most. And so that being said, I never made a big deal about it. Actually, never made a deal about it at all. But it turns out that they're not the happiest with it. So new podcast name, same exact podcast. And I decided to call it You're Not Crazy. I was sitting around thinking about what to name it, thinking about other names, and that's the one that flowed. And it just felt like that's it. You're not crazy, because that is the purpose of this work that I do. It's because I've spent so many lives and so many relationships feeling like I was a psycho, feeling like it was me, feeling like, why does this keep happening? And it was never like, oh, I just keep finding myself in similar patterns or similar patterns with a different flavor. It's like I continue to find myself in situations where somebody is constantly telling me that I think and feel something that I don't. And so we all can find situations like that in our life. And this is one that as I helped others, as I helped myself, I realized that a lot of us feel this way. And a lot of us are trying our best to figure out how to exist in these situations, how to get out of these situations, who we are after these situations. And I think throughout the whole process, we tend to feel crazy. So starting next week, I'll have a new intro and it will say, the You're Not Crazy podcast. That's what this is. Like I said, the same as before. And if you subscribe to the podcast, it will come up in whatever platform you have, because all I did was change the name. And so if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, now would be a good time to do it, so you get the automatic updates next week when there's a new title. I'm going to dive into a topic along the lines of You're Not Crazy. Now, this one's important because this one actually makes a lot of us feel very crazy. This is about sharing your feelings versus emotional manipulation. And if you've been here for a while, you've heard my rants about manipulation tactics that people continue to use to have power over you. And this goes back to something that I've discussed many times before and have also gone on tangents about, called the difference between intent and impact. This is the short version of what this podcast is about. I don't give a shit what your intent is. If you are hurting me, I don't care if you didn't intend it. I care about the impact. If somebody is hurting you and they keep telling you, oh, well, I didn't intend it, but then they keep doing it, they do intend it because they continue to do it, because they know they're hurting you and they don't care enough to stop. They don't care enough to do the hard work on themselves to stop hurting someone that they also claim to care about. A lot of times, somebody who is manipulative will use sharing their feelings as a way to hurt you. When we all know that when we're in these complicated situations, when we share our feelings, they are usually trying to reach a common ground in some way. But because we're here, I'm going to go on another tangent about intent and impact, because why not? When somebody says that they don't intend to do something and apologize, usually after noticing somebody is hurt, so then they apologize, But if they're actually sorry and not entitled, they would change their behavior because they didn't want to hurt someone that they claim to love. So again, they didn't intend it. They didn't want to do it. They hurt you. They don't want to hurt you. They change their behavior. And if you've listened to my podcast about apologies, you know that an apology without a change of behavior is manipulation. And we've all hurt people unintentionally. Like, let's be real, right? I certainly have. And that's what being human is. But I think it comes back to what do we do about it? I don't hurt someone, continue to hurt them, and then say, well, I didn't intend it. If I hurt you and I continue to hurt you, I typically apologize. I change my behavior. I edit my mindset and I don't do it again. If somebody in my life feels disrespected by me, that's the course of action I typically take. I am sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. And I change my behavior. And I look at what they are asking me for. We've all said things like, trying to be funny. We've all slipped words out. We've all made mistakes. Not about not making mistakes. It's about what do you do when somebody you care about or that you claim to love is hurting. An abuser or a controller or a manipulative person, they don't do that. They say, oh, you're hurt? I didn't mean it. You're sensitive. You're this. You're that. And people get bogged down with this idea that abuse and manipulation and control have to be intentional in order for it to actually be abuse or manipulation. But that's not true. That's the way that they see it, right? Well, if I intended it, it's not abuse. That's not it, right? You're hurting me. You're saying you don't intend it. I'm still hurting. And by telling me that it's my fault or that I'm just too sensitive is gaslighting. You're telling me that it's my problem that you're hurting me at the end of the day. And so the best way I saw this explained was calling it being sideswiped by abuse. And it's usually from people that we don't view initially as controlling people. We may not realize that. We may be very forgiving as they claim to continuously say they didn't want to, they didn't plan on it, they didn't think about it that way. But then they do it and they do it and they do it and they do it. And we feel like the crazy ones. But we are so conditioned to telling them that it's not them, that we understand that they didn't do it, whatever that might be. We continue to give them an out. Oh, they're not as self-aware. They're not this. They're not that. They are manipulating us. Because as this continues on and on and on, and you've pointed it out over and over and over, and they've done it over and over and over, they're still doing it. If someone was to continue to do it and then say, look, I can't stop. That is them owning their behavior. And there's probably a decision after something like that. I'm going to pause and do an example because I think that's important. I had a partner that slept late all the time. He was a bartender. He slept he'd go to bed at 3 or 4 and he'd sleep all day. Sometimes I wouldn't hear from him until 6 p.m. He'd sleep through plans sometimes. It was frustrating. And eventually I just said, look, this doesn't seem like it's going to change. This doesn't seem like it's working. It doesn't seem like it's working for you, quite frankly. If there's one day a week we can see each other and we're not seeing each other because you're sleeping through and I don't have the ability to stay up late. I'm a single mom. 9 p.m. is my cap. But this isn't working. Let's have a mature conversation about this. And then it turned into, I want to try. And he did try, but he couldn't. And we had to have that honest conversation. It's just different lives. That's more different people. And now another example. I had a partner kept blaming me for everything that happened in his life. The minute something went wrong, the blame went on me. The second he had a bad day and I couldn't comfort him, it was my fault that he wasn't feeling better. The minute that things were kind of going haywire or blowing up, it was somehow my fault if I wasn't there to be the calm in the storm. I have my own life. And so I'd continuously say this. I'd be like, look, I love you. I care about you. I wish I could be there, but I can't right now. And I'm sorry. I am free at 5 o'clock. And if you want, we can talk then. If you still feel like this is heavy, I'm sorry you're having a tough day. But this pattern of blaming me overtly, continuously, even to the point of picking fights with me so that he could get that rage or whatever out on me, would continue to happen. And he would see it happening and he'd say, I don't intend this. I don't mean to do this. I don't like that I'm doing this. But what was happening to me, right? On the other end of that, I was really not okay with the fact that it was continuously happening. I was not okay with the fact that I continuously had to regulate myself at times that I didn't that I was fine, right? Like I was going on with my day, and now I'm getting this rage of text messages, and whatever boundary I set, it would be crossed or be used against me. Say I'm look, I'm not going to respond if you continue to speak to me this way. I don't know why you're so upset. And then rage. I kind of know it's going to continue to happen, even if I set the boundary. And so what we do then is, I remember saying look, this is killing me and I'm not able to recover from it, because after you're done with this incident, you don't have a conversation with me after about, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Here's what I'm going to change. We come up with strategies that I can help pause you. They don't work because then you blame me for using a strategy, or you say things like, no, this isn't one of those times. It's always one of those times. And so I do think you're intending it. You can say up and down, you're not intending it, but the impact is so big. It is so huge. You're hurting me. This is hurting. And I don't think that you care, because you're able to tell yourself in your own framework, you didn't intend it, so it didn't matter. But the impact on me is activating trauma responses that I have to shut down. It's activating all these coping mechanisms so that I don't take it on. I'm having to turn to somebody that I'm not, because I am a caring and empathetic person. I don't want to hurt you. But now I'm taking responsibility for things that I didn't do. And I feel like I need to twist into a pretzel in order to show up for you. But there's no healing, because if I raise the issue, you're already past it. Now that's manipulation. Because even with the other example, we got to an adult conversation. In this one, it just spirals. And this gets me to the point. Somebody who's manipulative is going to continuously try and change your mind or change your actions so that they don't have to change theirs. They want to change your mind so that you don't feel like you are being hurt by them when they are hurting you. They don't have to change. They're trying to get you to do something or be something or think something that you don't want to. And at what point is it enough? At what point do we get to the point where if we follow that cycle of what I was explaining before, the only way it ends is if you stop caring about anything that they do. And then are you in a relationship anymore? Controlling people, manipulative people, abusive people are trying to get you to think differently or to change. But they claim it's not controlling because they believe that they're right and you're wrong. They believe themselves so strongly that they are right and they are entitled something over you. Imagine if this role was reversed and you were so sure, so confident, so something, and they didn't believe it. Chances are they would never budge. It's one thing to express your feelings, but it's another thing to demand that someone change their mind or actions as a result of you feeling that way. Meaning, you're hurting me. No, I'm not. No, you're hurting me. I'm not. The way that you see this is wrong. No, this is hurting. This isn't okay. This is the impact. You really are too sensitive. And of course, we can go in a whole conversation about boundaries and what that looks like, but that's really not the point here. And I've talked about it a lot on this podcast, right? You wouldn't be on this podcast right now if your partner responded to boundaries, right? You wouldn't be here listening to this, resonating with it if your partner understood. And so I think the work here is to begin to think about with somebody who is safe, somebody that's healthy, how they would act in this situation, how they would act, how you would act. Again, if somebody told me that I was hurting them, and people have, like we don't go through life not hurting anybody. Of course, people have said, Jessica, this really hurts. Like, or even partners, even that same partner. I said a lot of things, I'm sure, but I can remember a few examples that I just felt so ashamed of, like after he explained his hurt. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Wow, I'm really sorry. And then I never did it again, because safe people respect other people's boundaries. And you saying, like, don't speak to me that way, don't blame me, don't say hurtful things and then say you didn't intend it. That's a boundary, whether or not we say it, but they don't respect them because they feel entitled. They're the ones who get to set the boundaries in their mind. Unsafe people don't care. Sharing their feelings and emotional manipulation are the same, because they want to be able to share their feelings and manipulate you into acting accordingly based on their feeling. The best thing that you can do, if this is resonating with you, is to begin to make a list for yourself of how a healthy person would respond. This is something I did over and over and over again. I would write down the situation and I would respond with how a healthy person would respond. If I didn't know, I sought to figure it out. Say I didn't know how to react if somebody had a problem with a boundary that I had. I would understand, okay, am I setting a realistic boundary? Or is his response appropriate or not? Right? It again takes on that feedback of like, well, maybe I'm not wrong. Maybe I'm not wrong, right? When people come up with like assumptions for who you are, what you did, why you did it, and they don't align with what you actually think and what you do, and then they act based on that because they're acting based off their assumption, that's not healthy. And going back and thinking through, what would a healthy person do? How would a healthy person respond? How would I respond? You'll not only learn things about yourself, but you'll learn new coping mechanisms, and you'll also start to see the pattern. This is another way of ungaslighting yourself without going crazy. And so I hope that this was helpful. I hope it shed some light. And as always, please feel free to reach out to me at jessica@jessicaknightcoaching.com if you have any questions. You can follow me at Emotional Abuse Coach, and you can find me at emotionalabusecoach.com.